All right, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Charlie Starkey, Acting Chair of the Department of Philosophy and Religion and a Fellow of the Rutland Institute for Ethics. This talk constitutes part of Clemson University's Presidential Colloquium Series, which has been an element of academic life at Clemson for more than a decade. The series seeks to provide opportunities for Clemson University students and faculty, as well as members of the community, to come together and explore important issues. The colloquium comprises various events spread over the academic year, all of which fall under a colloquium theme, which is selected with an eye to its integration across the curriculum. The theme of this year's Presidential Colloquium is Rigor, Rights, and Responsibility in Research. It's my pleasure to introduce the speakers today. It's an unusual event and a welcome event. We have two speakers. The first is Cindy Puri, Professor of Psychology in the Department of Psychology, whom I've been doing collaborative research on courage for,
like 10 years.
Maybe more years than I care to count. Certainly one of the bright spots in my academic time at Clemson. She, in addition to courage, she serves as administrator for the Human Participants Research Pool. And her research also focuses on situational affordances. She's been published in numerous scholarly journals. And she is also now an associate editor of the Journal of Positive Psychology. And she co-edited The Psychology of Courage, Modern Research on an Ancient Virtue, in which we have a co-authored article on courage. In addition to Cindy is Alice Brawley. Alice is a PhD candidate in industrial organizational psychology. She received her MS in applied psychology in 2014. Her research focuses on unusual work experiences and worker populations, something I'd like to hear more about, and quantitative methods in organizational psychology. Alice has special interest in the ethical treatment and study of workers in novel and understudied populations, such as individuals working on crowdsourcing platforms. I give you Cindy Puri and Alice Brawley. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay. Today, Alice and I will present two different adventures that we've had with separate data sources for human psychology research participants. In both cases, the sources are limited, but in different ways, and in both cases, fixing these issues had ethical implications. So I'd like to start off with a question for the audience. How many of you have taken intro psychology? Any of you? You have. Were you in the intro psychology pool? You took AP Psychology, okay. You were? Nope, you were not. Okay. It's a standard setup in most psychology departments across the U.S. and as far as I know and can tell across most of the world is to have some sort of a basic setup where students who are taking undergraduate psychology courses can participate in research studies run by the faculty and grad students for either extra credit or as part of a course requirement. In every case, at least within the United States, the instructor has to offer some sort of alternative participation so that people aren't coerced into participating in these studies. And here at Clemson, if you take an intro psychology class or know anyone who is, you need to get 12 research credits. And those research credits can come from being in studies or from taking ridiculously easy tests on research articles. Basically, if you've read the title and skimmed it, even with no understanding of the topic, you should be able to get full credit on it, or some combination of the two. Other alternatives include things like students can write a short summary of a research article or can talk about research design in some way or can take tests on other chapters in the book that weren't covered. There has to be some alternative, basically, is what I'm saying. I've been managing our undergraduate psychology research pool for about as long as this colloquium series has been around, for about 10 years. And when I got to Clemson, we had a system of paper signups. So there was a large bulletin board when you got to the 4th floor of Brackett that had all kinds of, it looked like people selling couches and advertising for roommates and stuff. So there were all sorts of little pieces of paper where you could sign up to be in a study, and then you'd tear off the little reminder tab that would show you where and when to sign up. When I got here, one of the strong ethos, one of the strong organizational climates that we had within our department was that you must not say too much about your study on the bulletin board. Why? Well, this was to be fair to all of the researchers. So people had a chance to back out, right? But the researchers didn't want to have that sort of differential draw between a study. I do a lot of studies with emotions, so I have a study right now. Well, I just finished up a study a couple years ago where people watched funny YouTube videos. You know, you wouldn't want funny YouTube videos to compete against manual dexterity, because you wouldn't get anybody. So that was sort of our big thing, and I went a lot, and we did that, and it was fantastic. In the I don't even know what to call them, the mid-aughts, the early 2000s, we went to an online system, which was super exciting. With this online system came some unexpected problems. We like to think of our participant pool as psychologists as this vast ocean of people, limitless and self-renewing. Unfortunately, it's not a participant pool, or participant ocean, it's literally a participant pool. And so it actually has some of the same qualities as a swimming pool. The first problem we're going to talk about involves draining that pool, which happened to us. With the switch to the online system, we were also able to run online studies where we could collect all of our data online. This was nothing short of miraculous. Back in the old days, I'd collect data and I'd have questionnaires and I'd have you come into a room like this and I would hand them out to all of you, and then I would collect them, and then some poor student would be set, and frequently it ended up also being me, would be set manually typing in all of the numbers that you circled and all of the things that you wrote. And it was incredibly tedious and incredibly time consuming. This online study thing was just miraculous. Students loved it. The undergraduate participants loved it because they could just stay in their rooms and stay in their pajamas and participate without leaving the comfort of home. Researchers, we were no longer set. We were no longer stuck entering data manually. But more importantly, we got tons of data. At the time, my office was in a little corner of Brackett, and my office neighbors also were running online studies. And the three of us would come out every day and practically like high-five each other. How much data have you got? I'm almost done, that's amazing. That semester, I collected data from 250 participants. That was my set goal. And then I had a goal of 300 participants, and I got to 298. And that was when we had a faculty meeting. And I found out at the faculty meeting that things weren't rosy in the department. Remember I mentioned manual dexterity? People who were running studies like that required that you be there in person to interact with a particular piece of equipment were getting nobody. The mean amount of, the mean percent of the data that they needed that they got was about 50%. So some people were getting less than 50% of what they needed, and this was at the end of the semester. It was appalling. My study stayed at 298 participants because we quickly shut down all of the online studies, and then had a lengthy discussion about what to do and how to fix this problem. So I'd like to talk now about some possible solutions to this, and maybe get some suggestions from you about what you might do if you were us. Our main concern, of course, has to be to uphold ethical and fair treatment of participants. That's just a given. But in this case, we also would like to be fair to all studies and all researchers. So we're making the assumption that we really don't want to screw over our colleagues. We could, but that's not a department I want to work in. So given that, does anybody have any thoughts about how we could fix this? Yeah.
Make some kind of reward system for the in-person studies versus the online studies.
Make a reward system for the in-person studies rather than so they count double or something. Yeah, you could definitely create differential rewards, yeah?
Yeah, running off that, you could go to the specific departments and have them reward, specifically for whichever sets of courses you
Yes.
some portion of professors to offer some sort of extra credit or bonus for their own particular, courses for students to come to the in-person.
So you can
make use of being on the university.
So you can have some kind of managed economy type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other suggestions? Those are things that have been tried in somewhat different permutations. They all do meet the first standard of upholding the ethical and fair treatment of participants, I think, at least if done properly. But they might or might not be fair for all researchers. So other solutions that we considered are things that other universities use. The university that was our first service provider for the online system suggested that we simply limit the percentage of credits that students can get from online studies. So you can only get 7 credits at most from online studies. And there's actually even a little box in there that you could fill out to make that happen. What kind of problems might happen if you do that?
Do the 7 online things, and you do 5 other easy papers, and still avoid all the in-person activities.
Yeah, you could totally avoid the in-person activities. So you're still setting up this sort of differential system. Good. I hadn't actually even thought of that one, but that's a real good one. One of the other real problems, I guess I should have asked before, what areas are you all from?
Research compliance.
Research compliance, okay.
Computer science.
Computer science. Chemical engineering, okay.
Philosophy.
Philosophy.
Computer science.
Computer science, okay. So how many of you in academic departments at the start of the semester know exactly what your plans are for the whole semester? Yeah, we don't either. We have no idea. And so one of the problems would be sort of setting what that percentage is going to be, because we're going to need to estimate how many studies are going to be online and how many aren't. So we decided that was a bad idea. Another thing that I've seen done at other departments is to limit the number of participant credits that any given researcher can get. And that has, in my talking to colleagues from other psychology departments, has just caused a lot of friction and concern and complaint about people not being treated fairly. So one way to seem fair or equitable would be Alice gets 700 credits, I get 700 credits, Charlie gets 700 credits, assuming you're in psychology. But then the question is, what do you do if needs are different? So Alice is in IO psychology. Her studies typically require hundreds of people. I'm in clinical psychology. Depending on the kind of study I'm running, I don't do these anymore, but depending on the kind of study I'm running, I might need 10 people. That might not work out very well. So that's got that problem to it. The third solution is assigning students at the beginning of the semester to particular studies. And that one, to me, seems fraught with problems, because you're setting up another barrier for students to say they don't want to be in a study. And so that's like even worse. So they can't find out about it and walk away. They can find out about it, they're assigned to it, and they have to, it's like an anti-Milgram thing, really. They have to sign up and say, they have to actually sign up to opt out. And that, we were just not going to go down that road. That's just not going to happen. So we thought there were a variety of issues with each of these. The solution that we ended up settling on is actually one of making everybody come to an in-person session. And what we did with that, and it seems to so far be working pretty well, what we've done with that is students right now, and have always since I've been here, gotten 1 credit for every 15 minutes of participation. And so we tack on an additional 15 minutes to online studies and make them put on clothes and leave their room and come and talk to us. And in these sessions, students are asked to fill out the online questionnaire ahead of time. Then they are given, they sign up for an appointment time. When they come in for the appointment time, they're told, in our lab at least, they're given information about the study, and we actually think that the in-person meeting is a much better venue to provide information about why you were in this study. An obligation we believe we have because they're doing this as part of a psychology course, and so as part of the psychology course, we want them to understand the psychology behind what we had them do. And in-person is better than just something at the end of the survey where they just click past it and you have no idea if they even read it. They can ignore you in person, but it's at least a little harder. So we give them information about the study, and then we tell them in our lab, well, that's it then. You've now completed your participation in our study. That's the bad news. You came all the way here and you're done. The good news, though, is that because we made you leave your room and come here, you get an additional point for the study. The reason why we do this is to make things equal between all studies, to make things fair between all studies. Otherwise, in the past, what happened is that when we offered online-only studies and automatic credit for that, people completed all the online studies and left the researchers who needed people to come in person without the participants that they needed. So that completes your time here. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions? And everybody that I have worked with personally has seemed completely fine with this. We have equalized things. We have avoided the thing that I was afraid of, which is a managed economy, which doesn't seem to work particularly well for economies, and definitely would not work well with a participant pool where we're coming up, and I'm sure the people from Research Compliance can verify, psychology departments, we're sending you stuff all the time. And we want to retain that flexibility. And so that's worked out pretty well for us. Do you guys have any questions about that? As long as we're talking about the participant pool, I'll mention a few other ethical sorts of issues that come up in managing a participant pool. One ethical issue that does come up a lot is requests from outside the department to use the participant pool or to kind of merge some participant pools between different disciplines. And I'm a pretty interdisciplinary person. I've worked with Charlie for 10 years. I've worked with Laura Olson in political science. I'm working with Dart Schmalz in PRTM. I'm pretty interdisciplinary. But for the purposes of the research pool, as long as we're tying it to course credit, I definitely feel as though we have to keep it pure and keep it something that's related to psychology. So the standard that we've set is that it needs to be a project that has someone from the psychology department, either faculty or grad student, on the team as a full investigator. They'd be a co-author on a paper, any papers that would come out of it. My plan with that is that we are always able to explain to students how what they've been doing in research applies to their class, and we're hoping that they make those connections. So that's one issue that comes up. Another issue that sometimes comes up in managing a pool is in making sure people are fairly treated, the participants are treated fairly. Making sure that at the end of the semester, if a session is canceled, we just go ahead and give people credit because they won't have time to sign up for anything else. And it's not fair to them if we don't do that. We also have a pretty firm deadline that you have to be done collecting your data by 5 p.m. on the last day of classes, and everything has to be entered by then. So we get, that's another sort of issue that comes up that we see as participant protection, and is in protecting the integrity of the pool, that it's not some amorphous sort of thing. It really is, here's the very clear limits of it, and we want to make sure that that remains. We definitely never want to end up in a circumstance where somebody completes, the course is done and their grade's been submitted and then they've done extra credit. Like, that's a really bad situation. We don't want that. The other thing that I have been a stickler about, and I suspect everybody who runs in the psychology department has probably gotten a naggy complaining email from me yelling at them for not giving participants credit in a timely fashion. The new system that we have now is brilliant. It's set up so if you don't give people credit after 48 hours, it will go ahead and grant them automatic credit. So if I'm the researcher and I've fallen down on my job in entering whether you came in or not, you still get credit. But the problem with that is if we just let that go, that still doesn't really, that it's not the tight connection that I want people to see. And students can see that they didn't get actual credit for having participated. And so I want to make sure that people do that. So I send a lot of naggy emails. Being a parent has prepared me very well for that role. Any questions about our participant pool? In general, I don't believe it would be ethical of us to open it up to other disciplines. However, I would be more than happy to talk with anyone from any department who would like to set up their own pool about what we've done and how you could do it too. That would be no problem at all.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are professors permitted to advertise their studies through email?
Professors should not be advertising their studies through email for the subject pool. That's a separate thing. So sometimes we get individual professors who are paying participants, and that's completely fine. You can do, if you pay participants, that's like not a part of this particular pool of participants, and that's fine. In general, I prefer, if a study's having trouble recruiting people, I prefer to work with them to try to figure out and troubleshoot, like, what might not be appealing about your study? Are you only offering sessions at like 7 a.m. in the morning? You know, that might be the issue. In really rare circumstances, if some student isn't going to graduate because they don't have data, we'll let people do some additional, more targeted kind of stuff. But for the most part, we've tried to keep things sort of very general. And when somebody's got a study that they're like, they really need to finish it, and they just put up a whole bunch of new sessions that people can sign up for, I'll just send a blast email to every participant saying, there's been a bunch of new sessions posted, please go look. And that helps a lot usually. Good question though. Other questions? It's been a challenging balancing act, I can definitely say that. So going along with our pool metaphor, or actually even the literal pool name, another problem that you can have is you can contaminate the pool. And I touched on that a little bit within the undergraduate research pool. We don't want to contaminate the pool by giving the whole pool a bad reputation. So I try to make sure people get credited right away. I try to make sure that nothing goes beyond the time it's supposed to go and things like that. Alice will now tell a different story about our joint adventures, mostly her adventures really, with Amazon Mechanical Turk.
Thank you. So I am going to talk about, as Cindy mentioned, Amazon's Mechanical Turk, and this is another participant pool that we've used for our research. So first I'm going to introduce what Mechanical Turk is so we can have a common language and talk about some of the issues that we've run into doing research with this participant pool. So this is the homepage for Amazon's Mechanical Turk, which is a really long name, so we often call this MTurk or AMT because nobody likes to say Amazon's Mechanical Turk over and over. I prefer MTurk, so I'll use that one. And there are two sides to this website. So there are workers who complete tasks and requesters who post tasks for workers to complete. And so this has become really popular in a lot of research fields because we can post research tasks as requesters for workers to do as participants. And workers make money by completing these tasks, and the tasks have a name too, so you'll see here that we have HITS, and that's human intelligence tasks. So these are any tasks that a human can do better or faster than a computer. So we need human intelligence to do these. So one task that we might see on MTurk is something like this. So we might have a receipt, and we need to know how many macchiato lattes this person bought, or where they bought it from, or how many Schweinsnitzels they bought, or how much it cost them, or what date this receipt was. So we need a human to look at this receipt, find that date or that item, and then enter that into a different format. So a requester might have a pile of receipts. They need workers to use their human intelligence to go through and quickly extract whatever information they're looking for. But as researchers, we're usually not handing a pile of receipts to our participants. We're usually posting a survey or posting some type of task that we want them to complete. And I want to highlight, this is why it's gotten really popular in research, because as a requester, you have access to an awesome participant pool. So you have this global, on-demand, 24/7 participant pool. You can collect data any time of day. You can collect data from participants across the world when you're sitting in your office in Brackett Hall. You have basically an on-demand participant pool. Anytime you're posting something, you're getting almost an immediate response or almost immediate responses to your survey. The cool thing too is you can get thousands of hits completed very quickly. So you can get, for us that as researchers, that means we can get thousands of participants really quickly. And this has changed our vocabulary in our lab, where we used to say things like, oh, I collected data last year or last semester. And now I can say I collected data on Tuesday morning, and I got my 1,000 participants and I am done. And so this is really, really cool as a researcher or as a graduate student who wants to graduate in a timely fashion. And then the other reason that it's really popular both with researchers and requesters of all types is you pay only when you're happy with the results you're getting. So if you're getting participants who aren't taking your surveys seriously, if they're not giving you a long enough narrative response, if it looks like they're not paying attention, you don't have to pay the worker for their task that they completed for you. And that's something that I want to explain a little bit. So the workers have the option to accept any hit that they want, and then the workers complete the hit and submit it. And the point where they submit it is where the requester can take a look at the work and decide whether or not to accept it and pay that worker. But workers can also accept a hit, decide that they don't want to do it, maybe the receipt is all crumpled up, or the survey is way too long, or whatever it is, they don't want to do it, and they can return the hit. So they don't get any rejection or approval, they don't get paid or not paid. And workers actually build a reputation this way. So if they get a large percentage of their work rejected, if they're just going through and clicking through surveys as quickly as possible, they get a reputation on MTurk. Requesters also get a reputation, but there's no formal system for it. So workers do talk to each other. So the people in your participant pool will say, Clemson Psychology, that requester was really good, they paid me quickly, they were fair. Or they'll say, Clemson Psychology, that requester was a jerk, don't do their tasks. So this is why MTurk is great, but there's some things we have to consider with this. So this is one of our surveys that we've used recently. And with this issue of data quality, it's gotten really popular in a lot of research fields to use what are called attention checking items. So these are items where we know that survey takers should have a particular response if they're paying attention. So these are where we make sure that somebody's awake, that they're reading our questions, they're reading our instructions. So here we've got one attention checking item mixed in with two regular survey items. We have one about team orientation, liking to work with a group rather than working alone. And we would have them respond on this scale, from disagree to agree. How much is this true of you? Then we have one about making plans and keeping them. That's another survey item that we would want to be looking at some psychological construct with. Then we have one that blends in with all the others, but it's an attention checking item, and it is, I have never brushed my teeth. So this is an item where if participants are paying attention, we think we know what they would respond. We think they'd be somewhere on the disagree side instead of on our neutral or our agree side. So we've got this item. If participants are reading the items when they're going through, we know what options they should be selecting. So we can decide if they're paying attention or not. And so if they say strongly agree, I've never brushed my teeth, we're thinking that probably means they're not paying attention rather than they've never actually brushed their teeth. So these are some of the items that we use to make sure that participants are paying attention. There are other items like this. There are some that say, please select strongly agree for this item to show us that you're paying attention, or instruct participants to give a certain response. So in any case, we know that participants, if they're reading this, they should be giving us a certain response that we can use to evaluate whether we're getting good data from them. And so I want to talk about a particular attention checking item that we've used, and then talk about some of the issues that were raised with that. So this is a longer attention checking item, and it looks like a typical survey item asking about getting angry at coworkers and some scenarios that we ask people to give us an emotional response to. So these are things like a coworker takes my lunch, a coworker takes credit for the work I did, a coworker piles all of their work onto me. So these are all cases where if we give a lot of emotional response options, we would expect them to say something like distressed, hostile, upset. They're not going to be happy with these things. But if you read our entire instruction section, it starts out talking about these scenarios at work and emotional responses at work, but then at the very end, you see this question is actually concerned with whether you're taking our survey seriously. Please select enthusiastic in all three of those drop-downs. So for all three of these options, tell us this would make you feel enthusiastic. You would be enthusiastic if someone took your lunch. You would be enthusiastic if someone took credit for your work. You would be enthusiastic if your coworker passed on their work from their shift to you. So we're asking them to pick a really unlikely response to indicate that they're paying attention. So this one was one where I would get the data from participants, and I would evaluate that data before deciding to pay them. So they would go through our whole survey, they would encounter these items, they should select enthusiastic for all three, but even if they didn't, they would continue with the rest of the survey and then submit that and wait for me to decide to pay them. So I would take a look at the data for every worker and decide whether I was going to pay them based on their responses to these three items. So if they had selected ashamed, distressed, guilty, anything that we would probably be more likely to expect with these items if they didn't read the instructions, then I would decide to reject their work. That would affect their reputation, and they wouldn't get paid. So we're concerned as researchers about getting high quality data, and we want to know that our participants are